Hello, I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is Wednesday night, June 13th, and this is the meeting of Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority. Before you at the dais, you may notice a small little sweet treat. This is to celebrate and recognize the addition of Milpitas. There is much to celebrate. I'm sorry to announce that before you'd gotten to your seat, but I wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure it happened before it got eaten.
I know, I had to watch him.
Yeah, good. So if I can, we'll start with a roll call, please.
Yes, good evening. Chair Corrigan?
Here.
Alternate Director Matichak? Here. Director Grilly?
Here.
Director Tate?
Here.
Director Smith?
Here.
Director Miller? Here. Director Sinks? Here. Alternate Director Syok? Here. Director Gibbons?
Here.
Director Cortese?
Is it me?
Yeah.
Here.
Thank you. Director Bruins? Here. Director Craig? Here. And I will note that Director Harney is absent this evening.
Terrific. This is the time in the agenda where we take public comment. Any items that are not on the agenda tonight, if there's members of the public here wishing to speak, this is the time to do so. You're welcome to come up to the podium. We'd only ask that you fill out a speaker card with your name so that we can properly spell it in the minutes. Seeing no one, I'm going to move on to the consent calendar. Tonight, the consent calendar is chock or block full. Is there any item that needs to be pulled for further discussion? Hearing none and
Yes,
seeing.
actually, I would like to pull one I. I just have some clarifying questions on that.
Any other items? Okay, if I could get a motion to approve all except for one I. Thank you. Let's, I guess we need to vote. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, so now let's dig into one I. Jeannie, would you like to start?
Yeah, when I was looking at the policy, I had two questions. One is, when is this incentive payable? And two, is there a minimum tenure with the organization? Otherwise, you pay it back, or so the policy doesn't address that.
Great question. I would say it depends, and some things will get paid out immediately, but there may be others like relocation expenses that actually I would want to have a tenure to the employees, employment with us to get that benefit. So I would suggest maybe if the board is okay with approving this, I could bring back an amended version with the tenure. We did not think of that.
Let me just ask to make sure I understand. So you're asking if there's tenure on the employee that we're trying to hire from the other firm, there has to be a threshold?
If I give you a $15,000, because that's kind of the cap on this, a $15,000 incentive, and you take the position, and 6 months later you said, you know what, living here in Silicon Valley is more expensive than I want. That I underestimated this. Then what?
Terrific.
15 grand, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I think that's a valid question.
So, it can be handled a couple of different ways, but if we think we need to, so you're suggesting we approve this and have it come back, or can we just wait and have it come back?
I think bringing it back is probably a better idea. So I'll just bring it back next month and put on consent with that change.
Okay. Terrific. Sorry I did not get my question to you in advance.
No, it's a great idea. We didn't think of it, and improves the policy.
Agreed. Okay. With that, then, can I have, I think we'll just move on altogether. We don't approve or disapprove of anything at this point on that item. So that brings us to the business tonight on the regular calendar. The first item, number 2, employee recognition and introduction. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
So Chair Corrigan, I wanted to recognize 3 employees today who are leaving us after great service that they've provided, and then also introduce 2 new employees to you. So We have Kelly Hoogland and Victoria Yu, who are both climate fellows, and we want to recognize them for the work they've done, the great spirit that they brought to the organization. They're always open with coming up with ideas, very active in terms of where the Bike to the Future was the last and latest project that they worked on. They also worked on the website for CalCCA. As we were starting up, CalCCA didn't have staff, so we jumped in and Kelly worked on that. And Victoria created 2 videos for SVCE, and one of which won an award, which I think she's going to show us right there. So I'd like to ask the 2 of them to come up and receive a certificate of appreciation. Congratulations. Thanks very much. All the best.
If I may, I'd also like to add on behalf of the board, we cannot thank you both for the work you did. The Bike to the Future program was a ravishing success, as was the videos that we got to see up here at the dais about learning to understand how to read your bill. So thank you both for the hard work you did.
I would now also like to recognize Dennis Deesh O'Neill, who is our Director of Power Supply. And you'll get his tour de force of his presentation for the wind contract later today. I'm really sorry to lose him, but he is going to continue to be with the public power community. He's been recruited to Monterey Bay to be the power supply director there. He also comes from Monterey, so he wanted to return home. I've just had a great time working with him. He is professional, productive, creative, and we're really going to miss him. So, Dennis. Just take a photograph for our website. Thank you.
While the paparazzi's doing their job, I'd like to acknowledge the incredible work Dennis did for the organization, but specifically as somebody who's served on the risk committee with Dennis in our meetings. We're hopeful to see Dennis continue working closely with us as we work on joint projects with Monterey, and we wish you the best of luck.
So I'd now like to introduce 2 employees, Monica Padilla and Alex Rosas. I have Amy Bailey as our new director, but she'll be here next month. She starts on June 25th. Alex is an intern who joined us Monday, and he goes to San Jose State. He is undertaking a degree in entrepreneurship, and he's interested in the business side of how we work, so he's going to be with us throughout the summer. I'd also like to introduce Monica Padilla, who this is week 2. I had the pleasure of working with Monica way back when I started my, well, I shouldn't say way back, when I started my career. Impressed with her right from our Palo Alto days, and then after I left, so I find it's great to have her here. So she's left the Palo Alto utility. She did a lot of work on integrated resource planning, risk management. She was the main point of contact between the City of Palo Alto Utilities and a joint powers agency, Northern California Power Agency, and worked with all their contracts over there. So the timing actually couldn't be better for her to be coming in. And Tom Habashi was also her boss at one time. So she knows Tom at Monterey too. So wanted to welcome Monica to SVCE.
And of course, on behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome you both. We're so glad you've decided to join SVCE. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm going to move on to item number 3, the Customer Program Advisory Group Progress Update Report, which will be delivered tonight by Peter Evans, I believe. Are you going to start it? Yes, sorry.
I'll do a short preamble. Thank you, Chair, and good evening directors. As a tee-up for the presentation from the Customer Program Advisory Group tonight, we thought it would be useful to revisit the overall process that we're working along for forming SVCE's program roadmap. We'll bring up a flow chart here momentarily. This was in the board memo. But what you're seeing here describes several related threads in the roadmap development process, and all of them are important, and we're showing here how we see them being brought together. The first of the four triangles along the bottom represents tonight's presentation from the CPAG. The CPAG was commissioned by the Board of Directors last fall and was launched earlier this year. It's a Brown-acted body. It serves at the direction of the board. It's comprised of 16 residential customers from all around our service territory with a charter to help conceive and to validate energy program ideas targeting the residential sector. And you'll see other programs ideas here shortly. In July, staff is going to receive input from the member agency working group. The member agency working group is key sustainability and operations folks from our 13-member communities. At the July MOG meeting, the members are going to be bringing in their ideas for SVCE programs, and those ideas are coming from their climate action planning work. And some of our largest jurisdictions, such as Mountain View and Sunnyvale, are currently in the process of doing major updates to their caps. And these are involving large groups from their respective communities, task forces, and so forth. And they really wanted to get that latest input into the process. So we'll look for common denominators, common requirements across our communities that relate to electrification and decarbonization, and we'll then enter that into the mix here as well. We're also bringing on, as Girish mentioned, a new director of programs focused on decarbonization and grid innovation. She'll be joining in another couple of weeks, so we'll be helping with this process. We're going to bring together a high-level roadmap that brings together CPAG input, MOG input from our commercial and industrial customers into an initial view of a roadmap. And then that'll be presented to you. We'll have other forums for continuing to work that with our stakeholder groups, and then an ultimate goal of producing a finished product by the end of this year. So that's the overall context that we're working within for program development, and that we're getting a first view of here tonight with the CPAG.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, thank you.
So is the next order of business to have Peter make
Absolutely.
a presentation?
Yes.
I did have received one comment card, so what I'd like to suggest is Peter makes his presentation. There's any questions that you'd like to address to Peter, and then we'll open it for public comment and bring it back up here for any further discussion. Thank you, and welcome, Peter.
I'll be brief. I know you have a busy agenda. So is this going to give me... Okay, good. So Customer Program Advisory Committee update. First of all, I want to give some props to the committee itself that you guys gave me. This was a great group of people. I learned a lot. They brought their ideas. There's somebody here, I think, from every community that's a member of Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and this ended up being a great, hardworking, value-creating group of people. And I just want to say it was a joy to serve as their chair. And hopefully you'll find that what they provided for you is useful. Also, we got a ton of support from the staff. I don't know necessarily that the staff was planning to put in as much time on this committee as they did, but they did. And I mentioned Pamela and Andrea here and Don Bray, but also Sarah Jo and Don Eckert. And we had a group of employees at most of our meetings. So, they were super supportive, and we would not have gotten to this point without their help. So this is what I characterize as our charge, and this is a little bit of a riff from what it says in the motion that you guys passed. It also is based to some degree on some of the comments that individual board members made. And I saw our role as, first of all, don't just review things that other people have done, bring new ideas. And then second of all, and as importantly, try to get close to the customers and close to the community. I mean, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, let's face it, is a thing created by policy. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to try to reach into people as consumers and people as members of these communities and to try to get priorities for, give life to priorities for them. And then we also needed to just not come up with things we threw up on the wall. You'll see some pictures of things we threw up on the wall in a minute, but actually do some work to prioritize and evaluate and test the ideas that came out. And then, yeah, we were supposed to report in June, and we're reporting in June. So our first month was more of a meet and greet type of thing, so I'm starting with month 2. And we had what was basically a brainstorming session to come up with potential program benefits. And I actually think, probably some of my committee members would disagree, but I actually think this was the most important part of what we did, because we basically threw it open and said, what should energy consumer programs do? You know, what benefits should they provide? And you can see this is a pretty long list. I'm not going to go through it. Some of the themes that sort of bubbled through were customer empowerment, cost savings, GHG reduction, and supply and demand alignment. But we tried pretty hard not to prioritize these or group them or put any English on them. We just worked with this list. And this was going to be the list that we tested our ideas against. So month 3, we started to come up with actual program ideas, brainstorming, and it was a process. You can see our process here, sticking things on the wall and walking around and getting ideas. I don't know how many of these Post-its we had. There was a lot. But anyway, what it came back to and sort of coalesced around these, I think it's a dozen program briefs. And these are actually the ones that are briefed in your packet and the ones that we evaluated ultimately. So then in month 4 and 5, we first scored these program briefs, these dozen program briefs, against the program benefits, that long list of program benefits that you saw. And those score sheets are in your packet. We also did a high-level cost and carbon evaluation of each of these programs, so we could use that as one of the standards to evaluate them. We asked individuals in the committee to go out to their communities and just sort of ask the open-ended question, what could a retail energy supplier do for you as a consumer that you would like to see? And so we got that input. And then the last thing we did, and I listed them here because it was part of our formal objective evaluation, is we evaluated not all of the reasons to select a program have to do with their benefit. There's clearly other factors. And so we also considered these other factors, whether it can scale, what share of customers will participate, how long it'll take to implement, how long it'll take to get benefits back, and on how uncertain those benefits are, and then also the cost and the cost of carbon, at least based on our rough estimates. And then the final thing we did, this is now 5 months in, is we gave people 3 dots, and they could select any or all or none of the dozen programs we had. And so, you know, what this reflects, I think, is, you know, who knows how the individual committee members processed all of these inputs, but everyone had their own idea of what was important to them, what they thought was important to their communities, and placed their dots. And they ended up being, you know, a pretty interesting and sort of not very confused ranking. There's a top third. I wouldn't say necessarily that there's a ranking within that top third, but there's 4 of these programs that sort of floated through as being pretty widely supported. And then I listed the rest here in order. They all got votes. I think they all got votes. You can, again, look in your packet. But, you know, there was people who supported any of these. And so this is, I think, the committee's view as a group, if there is such a thing as a group view, of what they cared about for whatever reasons and evaluation and ranking and so forth that they put on all of the factors that we looked at. And because these aren't so totally self-explanatory, I'll explain what at least the top 4 were. They're all in your packet. Residential electricity monitoring, this would be monitoring and analytics to provide customers with real-time consumption data on their smartphone, and ideally to reveal how individual loads contribute to that. Electricity Bill Explorer is using bill data, basically, and analytics to provide customers with use comparisons, customers with personalized use comparisons for their own use versus peers, their own patterns, norms, people want to know, am I an outlier? And so this would tell them. And then also to provide a fit with rate options as they emerge. Residential BE ready, that's beneficial electrification. If you don't know what BE is by now, then these guys will teach you. It's a self-assessment tool and resources to ease electrification conversion. There's a pretty steep activation energy to making these conversions, and so these are tools to allow people to determine whether they're good candidates and what they would need to do to make that happen. And then the last one here is multifamily EV charging. We had a great presentation from Pamela where she talked about what it's like what her experiences were living in a multifamily home situation and how hard it is to avail yourself of electricity efficiency resources and EVs and things of that nature. And this is a big challenge. People that live in multifamily places can't charge their EVs. And so this was the last one we put in here as a program to promote that. So actually what I'll do is stop there and see if people have questions about the programs or how we evaluated it or our process.
Terrific. Anybody have any questions? Well, I'm going to just say, Peter, I read through the report thoroughly, and I love the way you guys attacked this. I thought it was just terrific to distill down to, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Rod.
No, go ahead. I mean, why don't you finish?
Well, just that. I think the process was fantastic, and it got us to a point with some real clear, identifiable action steps that can go into the pot for further discussion. I really like that you took different lenses to look at it. Is it achievable? Is it scalable? What's it going to cost? What are the benefits in terms of offsetting carbon? It just seemed very thorough to me, and I want to applaud you and the whole committee for the work you've done.
We're still puzzled about what BE is.
Beneficial electrification. Fuel switching.
Fuels, thank you. Thank you.
Fuel
Okay.
switching.
I will remark that from committee members and staff, I've heard great things about your leadership as chair of the body. I think we can all be delighted that you took on that role. So that's my comment.
I'm sorry, Peter, one more time. Where are you from?
I think Cupertino.
Anyone else? Any questions? Peter, do you have any other comments you'd like to wrap up with?
Well, just next steps. So the committee's actually it's still existing, and we have a meeting scheduled for next week, and we plan to keep meeting until September, thank you. And so I think what I would say is the committee wants to stay involved with these programs, and I would say that they represent sort of a unique resource to Silicon Valley leadership, or Silicon Valley Clean Energy, in the sense that they're as close as you have to the customers and the communities. And none of the other CCAs really have something that's like this, specifically focused on customer programs, at least not so far as I'm aware. And so the committee would like to continue to work to shape these programs. We didn't expect that the things that we proposed would be sort of lifted and done. And we would like to continue to work to shape these. And then I think there's another thing here which I listed as the second bullet, and that is that ultimately it will be people like the people on this committee who will either participate in these programs or not participate in these programs. And I think a great perspective that this committee can provide is, would you sign up for this? And if not, why not? And if yes, why? What about it is you like? And the committee it's diverse. Some people have a ton of expertise and they're, total energy geeks, and then other people are, I wouldn't say this is necessarily new because they were motivated to sign up, but I think they do represent something that's closer to the 200 and whatever thousand residential customers that SVCE serves. So with that, I think that's it. So thank you all for your confidence in our committee and for giving us a chance to serve you.
Thank you for the excellent work. So, yeah, I'll give that I know I have a speaker card from James Talia. If there's anyone else who'd like to speak, this would be the time to submit a speaker card. Hi, James, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much. James Talia, city of I live in Sunnyvale, resident of Sunnyvale. And I am speaking in two parts. First part is for myself and chairperson of the board of Carbon Free Silicon Valley and leadership team of Sunnyvale Cool, climate advocacy, and member of the CPAG. Wanted to thank the board and staff and leadership for forming the CPAG and allowing us to participate in the process to provide input and feedback into the process of coming up with programs and as we go forward. I think it's important for community engagement as well as idea generation. Another thing with that same hat on, just wanted to point out one thing that I think is significantly off in one of the evaluation pages in the program evaluation worksheet for cost and carbon. I just need to point out that the Be Smart upgrades for water heating and space heating and fuel switching, the cost estimate that's in that worksheet is based on a misunderstanding of what the proposal was. It's not proposed to be incentives provided through the budget of SVCE, which makes the cost seem to be in the range of $50 to $100 million. The proposal is actually explicitly to not do incentives, to do a financing on bills, because the cost savings over time will pay for that. So that's a 10x misunderstanding, at least, an order of magnitude off in the cost. It throws off the evaluation if you look at that. So just wanted to point that out because it's so far off. But there will be more consideration later. The second, just briefly, with the hat on of, I work for Home Energy Analytics, and we do some of what ended up in the Electricity Bill Explorer and residential electricity monitoring, although I didn't participate in any discussion on that or any voting on that because of my public role. I didn't want any conflict. So this is the first public comments I've made. Just wanted to introduce Home Energy Analytics and the Home Intel program and the technology that Home Energy Analytics has to address these areas that ended up at the top of the list, despite my non-involvement in that part of the discussion. And we look forward to participating later in providing information about that. It's the only tool or technology in this area that has already been selected by the major utilities for these kinds of purposes. More later. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, James, for sharing those observations. And what is the name of the program you're with again?
The company is Home Energy Analytics, or HEA. And the program that it's called now, that's actually run under PG&E, and it's also been selected to run at Southern California Edison. This program is called Home Intel. It's for residential energy efficiency, analyzing people's smart meter data to help them find their energy waste.
And if somebody wanted to do that, they can currently do that, right? And how would they do that?
They can currently do that. In fact, in Sunnyvale, prior to PG&E's engagement with the program selection, the same technology is being used to run the Sunnyvale Green at Home program. So people would sign up at homeintel.hea.com if they're interested to figure out where their energy waste is.
I will disclose to the board that James has come to my house and worked with my husband to do the assessment, and we are working on a testimonial or a statement about how it's helped us. So I'm glad to hear you're still doing that, and that you just told the public how they can sign up. So thanks a lot.
In full disclosure, I'm a client as well. It's a fascinating and almost embarrassing look at your energy use. I highly advise you, if you're sick of paying your high bills, to look at how you're using your energy at home.
And finally, I am glad to see that Sunnyvale was very well represented on the committee with 3 members, so that was the most of any city, and I'm very happy. I mean, hey, if Low South is.
I hear that.
Okay, thank
It's a
you.
very competitive board up here. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Any other questions of James? Liz, is your question?
No.
Not of James. Thank you, James. So I'm going to bring the conversation back up here for further discussion. This is not an action item tonight. It's just for discussion. Liz?
Thank you. So I wanted to just say Campbell is also in the middle of doing a climate action plan update, so put that on your radar as well. And I wanted to know if there were any other members of the CPAG here. If there are, they should stand up. And we just want to say hello and thank you. Yes, well done, well done.
Thank you, guys.
And the Campbell member has had switched jobs and had to resign from the committee and was sad to do so. But maybe we could have a certificate program for anyone who has gone through and expressing our appreciation for all their efforts.
Give them a bicycle shirt. Extra small. I think we have a few extra. So if there's no, oh yeah, please.
I just, you know, we put together the group, we put it with a limited time frame, and there was some discussion about what sorts of advisory boards or committees we want. They expire in September. Is there any direction we want to give to staff on that at this time, or do we want to discuss advisory groups when we get our programs guy on board? It's really a question for us. I know Gresh might have a comment. But
So, before he makes his comment, using Don Bray's presentation and that model, I think it's appropriate, at least for the time being, allow our new staff to come on board, take the CNI input, take the MOG input, collectivize all of it and develop a program. I think if they're meeting again in September, the timeline should all kind of come together at around the same time this fall, and we should look at how to proceed once we have a little more direction. What do you think?
I was thinking they expire in September and it all lines up at the exact same magic moment. It might be worth our while to say, ask them if they're willing to stay till December, and that lets us push off the whole big discussion till after somebody starts, then we'll figure out what we need.
Any feelings or input from the rest of the dais here? I'm not sure we need to be that specific. I think if you just leave them operating until September, we should have a sense by then of what happens next. And perhaps we just ask on this, please. Girish, would you like to say something?
I think to emphasize what Peter was saying too, we'd like to take advantage of the interest and the experience that this group has had. I think we could bring you something. If you have to take some formal action, we can bring it to you in July or September, extending the term through December, so we don't have to rush at that point. I think we found the input from the group to be quite valuable, but we don't want to keep a customer group going for too long also, because it's quite a time commitment. So if it's the board's pleasure, I could bring something back in July, just extending it to December.
But you might as well bring it back in September. That'll
Okay.
allow everything a chance to come together.
Yeah, and I think with all due respect, I'd like to see your
Okay.
new director, really have a chance to get her head around the input and decide with you, right? And the board, you know, what's most appropriate. in
And we'll
terms
bring a
of all this.
recommendation.
So September seems like the right
September
time.
seems good.
September's the magic day, given the fact that the board is not meeting in August, and that July is so close. So let's just hang out there until September, if that works for you.
Yeah, I think the trick is just there'll have to be something on the agenda someplace in case we need to take action.
Super.
Yes.
Any other comments on this agenda item before I move on? Okay, then we will move on to item number 4. Adopt a resolution authorizing the CEO to execute a 15-year power purchase agreement for renewable supply with Duran Mesa LLC. Hello, Dennis. Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm excited to bring to you for approval our 15-year power purchase agreement with Duran Mesa, which is the parent company of Pattern Energy. This is a wind farm, and I'm hopeful that you will all be big fans of this project by the end of my presentation. Thank you for that. All right, so
That really sounds like Monterey kind of humor. I'm not sure how that fits with us.
sorry.
Let that be a warning to you.
So just to refresh everyone's memory that this project and contract came about as a part of a joint request for offers that Silicon Valley ran with Monterey Bay back in, we issued it on September 15th. The deadline was October 13th, whereby we received 87 unique offers to build 49 new projects. Over the next month after we received these offers, we evaluated them, which I'll talk to our method in a minute, but we thereby notified our shortlisted selected projects on November 17th, and we started negotiations with those shortlisted developers in December, and we're bringing them to one of the 3 projects to you today. To spend a minute talking through our criteria for reviewing those 87 offers, we had two approaches whereby one was quantitative analysis of the offered prices with the quantities that we expected to receive evaluated against sort of the benefit to us in terms of energy, resource adequacy, green attributes, and even the value of the storage, because as part of this RFO we made it a requirement that any solar projects bidding in had to have a storage component to it. In addition to the quantitative, we also added a layer of qualitative criteria whereby, one, we wanted to make sure that the project was viable with regard to the developer and how much experience they had, also how far along in the development process they were for these projects that they had offered in. And we also gave a preference to local resources as part of that qualitative criteria. So we evaluated those, and then we came up with our short list of offers that whereby they accepted and agreed to begin negotiations with us. And here are the 3 projects that we selected. The Duran Mesa Pattern Energy Project, which is the one we are talking about tonight. The other 2 are the solar plus storage projects, one with Recurrent and one with EDF. We are trying to bring one of those solar plus storage projects to you in July for approval. And so with that, I want to start talking about this wind project a little bit in more detail and give you some of the specifics about it. So the project is known as the Corona Wind Project. It's a 200 megawatt project in central New Mexico in Torrance and Lincoln counties. Of the 200 megawatts, Silicon Valley will be the off-taker of 55% of that output, and Monterey Bay will be the recipient of the 45%. It's going to be a bucket 1 transaction, and the delivery point is the CalISO scheduling point, Palo Verde. If you take a look at that map, I do want to point out, because I figure folks may be thinking about it, but if you notice, Palo Verde is actually in Arizona, right? You may be wondering, what's that all about? Well, the CalISO is technically expanded their grid, so to speak, into Arizona to that point, so that when a delivery occurs at that hub, it is considered part of the CalISO grid. And so that's where we take delivery of it, and then we manage the transmission up to our service territory. As part of this project, there's also a brand new transmission project that's being built concurrently with the wind farm, and it's known as the SVCEA transmission path. So if you look at this map, you can see that this path is going to really bring stuff from an area that is known to have a lot of wind and allow it to be delivered into California. So yeah, the SVCEA path is it's a 300 megawatts of capacity that will be able to flow into California. 3,000. I'm sorry, thank you, 3,000. The next slide, I realized after I prepared this slide, I got a little too geeky on introducing a term that some folks may not be familiar with, so let me add some color. A capacity factor is really a way to think about it is sort of the utilization rate of the power plant. So what percentage of the time over the course of a year that a power plant might be operating and generating power. So before I talk about what Corona Wind's capacity factor is, I just give you some benchmarks, is that, you know, a nuclear power plant, which pretty much runs 24/7, has got a 92% capacity factor. That's because sometimes they have to take outages to do some maintenance. Geothermal has a 76% capacity factor, hydro 45%. In general, across the U.S., an average solar capacity factor is 27%, and wind in general is 37%. And when you talk about renewable power and capacity factors, it's really about the availability of the fuel. So how much does the wind blow for wind farms? For solar, it's how much does the sun shine. So, it's to me, this is really one of the selling points, is that this project has a 48% capacity factor, far exceeding what the capacity factors in California happen to be, by the way, which is around 27%. So what it means is we're getting more renewable power delivered to us from a project that is in New Mexico, whereby if we built that same project in California, it would not deliver as much. And no conversation about wind and solar is complete without getting into the duck curve. So let's talk about the duck curve a little bit. I think most folks are familiar with this graph and if not, I'll just quickly review. It kind of shows what the CalISO calls the net load, meaning showing the consumption or load in the California territory minus any sort of wind and solar generation supplying that load. So you get this duck curve belly here in the middle of the day when you have all that solar flowing onto the grid, and the effect of this period of time is it really depresses wholesale market prices for power to such a degree that prices could go negative, and thereby the CalISO grid operator has to give the power away for free to neighboring states, or they actually tell some of these solar farms to stop generating or curtail. I think that's the most common thing we think about with the duck curve, but as it relates to this wind farm, I want to focus on this other part of the duck curve, the neck. This is something that happens when that solar power starts to taper off in the evening hours. The grid operator has to replace that with something, and it's a mad scramble because that solar tape drops off quickly, and they have basically about a 3-hour period to replace all of that. And so I borrowed this slide actually from the CalISO, which had 2 days of February 18th, and then this evening ramp. They're showing that it had a 3-hour ramp of 14,000 megawatt hours that they had to go find to replace that solar power that was dropping off, and it's challenging for them to do so. And so as it relates to the Corona Wind Farm, I do want to, this is a sort of a slightly different view of the duck curve, but focusing on this this highlighted area, I want to just show you that what did the CalISO have to do on this day, February 18th, to replace the solar power. They had to bring in 62% of their power they had to go find from out of state. And 28% is thermal. That means they had to turn on these peaker plants to do so. And then they had some hydro. So the Corona Wind Project, as I'll show in a minute, does have a very complementary generation profile during the evening ramp period. So what I've done here, you don't need to pay attention to the scale on the side. What I basically did was overlay the CalISO net load for a specific day, one in June and another in August, and the generation profile of this Corona Wind Farm to show that the blue line, which is the profile, is showing that it actually is starting to ramp up during that evening ramp. So it really complements that ramp period and helps make the grid operator's job easier. And it is as I said before, the capacity factor is great for us because we're getting a lot more power from a wind farm than we would if it was based in California. I think this slide is just overkill, showing the benefits of a wind farm as the solar tapers off. All right, so I do want to spend a minute talking about the developer, Pattern Energy. They are actually, well, they trumpet themselves as the largest independent developer of wind, solar, and storage resources in the nation. They are a big company. They have about 4,000 megawatts that they operate, and they have 10 gigawatts of projects in the pipeline to build. They are a publicly traded company, and yeah, what else can I say about them? Yeah, so they have, been around since I think 2009. They started as a startup just building wind farms, and then they went public in 2013 and have tripled in size since that going public. So they are a developer that we feel confident can get this project online. And then just last, this is the current development schedule with regard to, as it shows here, some of the completed projects, but they're going to be executing PPAs with Silicon Valley, assuming you approve this, and also with Monterey Bay later in this month. And then they're going to go through and get some final permits before they start construction and bring the project online in the fourth quarter of 2020. So with that, it concludes my presentation, and happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dennis. Howard, would you like to go first?
Sure, I figure I'll go into the weeds. No, I'm actually super happy about this. There's a lot of positive things to say. We talked 6 months ago, and I totally forgot to ask in advance, so here's the corner case question on this. Bats and wind farms, especially with the larger windmills, have problems. And I just wanted to know, these guys have done something to mitigate wildlife impacts of these windmills.
Well, if you recall, Howard, I provided to you the New Mexico equivalent of their EIR report, and as my read of it, I'm not a specialist, but it did not require them to do any sort of mitigation with regard to bats and or other bird avian species, which tells me that the assessment felt they weren't going to negatively impact those species in the area.
So they've added nothing for bats because they don't have to?
That is correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? No. First, I want to thank you for the really clear and easily digested report of very complex information that is sometimes hard to get your head around, but I really appreciate the way you delivered it tonight. I'm looking for direction from the board with a motion to adopt.
Do we have any public
We'll need
comment?
public
Oh,
comments.
sorry. Yep. Thank you. See, I get going a little too fast here. I apologize. Anybody here who would like to speak on this item from the public? Hearing none and seeing none, I will bring it back up here, and I'm looking for a motion to direct staff to adopt the resolution delegating the authority of the Chief Executive Officer to execute a power purchase agreement for renewable supply with Duran Mesa LLC.
So moved.
And a second? Second. Thank you. I'll let you decide who to give that motion to. Is there any further
I wanted
comment?
to make a comment before we voted on this. I'd like to compliment you, Dennis. I understand that you're going to continue to be negotiating from a different chair, a little further south, in the joint procurement deals that we have. So I've really been impressed with your work here, and the fact that we're able to bring this in as bucket one resource from an area of a lot of wind is wonderful. I mean, this capacity factor is a big deal for us. We can put, what were we talking about, steel in the ground anywhere. We can put in resources anywhere on a grid, potentially. But to get the transmission back to CalISO and make this promise real means for the first time that, we are moving the needle for real on climate change. We're not just taking what somebody else might have otherwise used. We're investing now, and I think that's a big deal. I look forward to seeing what our marketing team can make of this. Maybe we wait till we've completed, the other deals in the next month. But I think we ought to make, we ought to make folks aware of this real milestone in our development. So thank you for your work here, and thank you for continuing to work on yet more renewable resources that we're going to bring online and to mitigate climate.
And Liz?
Thank you. Echoing all of those comments for sure. I wanted to just mention a few things that I had discussed with staff that I thought would be helpful for everyone to know is one of the strengths of this, I wanted to reiterate, is that we are required to have this future capacity. And this is really a great way to do it, not only because of its capacity, but also because of its being bucket one. I mean, so that's hitting all the bars, I think, really, really well. And then one other thing is that we don't have a credit rating, and we might have gotten even better terms if we'd had a credit rating. So we all know that that's where we're planning on going, and this is a good example to keep in the back of our minds going forward as to where a credit rating will help us in the future.
Any other comments? I'd like to call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item number 5, SVCE Employee Compensation and Benefits Strategy. This is a discussion item tonight. Thank you and welcome. I'm sorry, I guess I'm rushing.
So Chair Corrigan,
Yes,
I'll start this presentation.
thank you.
So, and then hand it over to
Don.
So we could have the first slide up. Thank you. All right. So when I took a look at the strategic plan, when I joined, looking at areas that we needed to focus on, in addition, my own experience over the last few months, this comes out of our strategic plan in the workforce section. And sorry, the text is a little small here, but I've highlighted in red the different areas in our strategic plan around workforce that this presentation is addressing. So dealing with employee health and wellness, building an environment that encourages creativity and innovation, which includes encouraging professional development, right down to number 6, rewarding staff to keep them engaged, annually updating a compensation schedule to account for a cost of living adjustment, and continuing to provide competitive benefits. So this presentation basically hits on all these areas. This is something that's not new to you. I just pulled it off the web. There's dozens and dozens of references one could use about how hot this market is, especially in Silicon Valley. I think the Fed just raised its interest rate today, right? It's a really hot economy. So here I highlighted a couple of areas, which is this is employees' market. I mean, they can really go any place they want to. So when I look at that, there's a lot of flexibility for employees. And when I also look at the kind of demographics we have here in Silicon Valley, and I know this is true in most places, but work-life balance is also a very important criteria and value we need to be looking at. So not only do we have a lot of CCAs have just gone operational, in fact, we talked about the J curve in CCA formation. You know, from SVCEA was the 5th one to form, but since then, today we have 13 operating JPAs, 16 operating JPAs. In fact, some of them just started on June 1. 3 of them started on June 1. And they're all competing for that same talent pool. And you're also very well aware that retaining an employee way cheaper than getting a new employee. And it's not just the delta of salaries and things like that, it's the entire momentum of the organization. When someone leaves, you don't see things happening. the momentum slows down. I think at SVCE, we've had our own experiences with that over the last 8 or 9 months. So we are in a different place today than we were close to 2 years ago when we put our benefit package and just that philosophy together. When you put this together close to 2 years ago, I think you had one employee and we had loans that we had taken from each city. This was still theoretical for us. We've gone operational, we've gone through a whole year of operations. It's funny to go to some of these meetings and we are one of the experienced utilities because we've been around so long. We are financially stable. You've passed 2 sets of rates. Our reserves, we are on our path to hit a $140 million reserve target in 2019. We expect at the end of this year we'll be at $70 million. A high-level metric I'd like to share with you, I worked all my career in cities, so when I always looked at city budgets, they tend to have, labor budgets tend to be somewhere between 65% to 85% of the general fund budget tends to be labor. Our labor budget is a little less than 2%. So it's just contextual as to kind of organization that we are. Another thing I wanted to frame is this is comes from Hertzberg two-factor theory. So it's an old theory, but it's also been updated more recently. When employees, there are dissatisfactors and motivators, and those are different things. Basically, dissatisfactors are things that if you provide employees these things, it's not like they're going to say, awesome, we love you guys. But the lack of having it in there causes a lot of problems in employee morale, and it pushes employees away. So you got to work on the whole picture, both on getting rid of your dissatisfactors and really push on all the things that add to motivation and satisfaction. So when you look at our strategic plan, we are focusing on all of them. Today's presentation is just focusing on maybe on addressing some of the dissatisfactors and having that discussion around that. And those are the bullets on the left-hand side, company policies and benefits like insurance plans, vacation plans. And we'll be coming back to you at the next month's meeting with salary information. Again, the strategic plan says we should annually update our compensation plans and do a survey. So, in fact, we just got the survey results this morning, and we'll be looking at this with the Finance and Administration Committee when they meet next week and bring it back to the board next month. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Don to take us through the presentation.
All right, thank you, Girish, and good evening, Madam Chair and fellow directors. So key components, as Girish mentioned, for attracting and retaining the employees that we have is we'll focus on pay, benefits, and careers. And we won't touch on every item in these boxes, but we'll touch on most of them tonight. So we'll look at pay for the first couple of slides, and the items in red just mean that those are the items that I'm covering on this slide. So as Girish mentioned, we just received the results this morning from Bryce Consulting regarding the compensation study. Staff will be putting their heads around that tomorrow and Friday to have something prepared for a first draft for the Finance and Administration Committee next week. And then if come to a consensus, we'll bring that to the board meeting in July. Another item is the recruitment incentive. We had that on consent that got pulled. We'll bring that back next month. Another item that could be put under pay would be an in lieu of option. Many of your cities do have this option where if you choose to opt out of the benefits that your employer offers you, you get some sort of a compensation for that. In our case, we're considering a $500 a month compensation if you opt out of our benefits, which does then relate to or equate to about a $500 savings for SVCE per month. Continuing with pay, we'll look at paid time off cash outs. So in my previous employer and many of your member agencies, many of our member agencies, we do have an offer where an employee could have some sort of a hardship and they want to cash out the paid time off that they've already accrued. What we're considering here would be a partial cash out, where we don't want an employee just never taking vacation and cashing all that out. So offer it partially, but it would be for what they've already accrued. So essentially no financial impact to Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Also, a performance plan where we tie some sort of a pay per performance with merits based on performance reviews. I call that a longer term strategy, but actually it's something that we're going to do much sooner. It's been on hold as we went through the CEO transition, and it's something that we want to definitely nail down to a more formal process this summer. And then lastly would be a cost of living adjustment, or COLA. We had, if you may recall, in the budget process last year, where we did factor in a 3% COLA that became effective for all employees on October 1st. What we'd like to do is maybe take some of the subjectivity out of that and follow an index that's published, the Consumer Price Index for the Bay Area that's published. In fact, Marin, or MCE, follows this approach. And it's capped at 4%, and in this case, if we're up to 4%, that's where the min and the max salaries would then move those ranges by whatever that index dictates. I also think that there's a portion of that that can be based on merit. There's also a portion of that should be automatic with inflation. Those are things that we need to work out in-house, but we want to offer that idea tonight. Looking at benefits. Health plan right now, we have a cap of $1,000 per month per employee. That works for some, not for others, so it's a good time to reevaluate the health plan options that we offer and see if there's some new strategies that we should consider. Also on retirement, we currently have a 10% match on deferred compensation. Most if not all of you are in CalPERS. We are not. So a way to retain folks would be to tie some sort of increase in what the employer matches to the longevity of that employee with us. And then work-life balance. Grish mentioned it in his opening comments. Currently we have 4 weeks of paid time off, and that covers sick, vacation, just time off in general. Some of the member agencies dissect that between summer vacation, sick, and so we just offer 4 weeks to cover everything. Many of our member agencies also have a 980 work schedule that's offered for employees. Now the employee does put in the 80 hours to get to that every other Friday off or Monday, whatever the schedule dictates, but in essence, that employee is then earning that 26 days off per year. So the approach that we have would be around 15 days per year versus the 26. We could have a 1 week of mandatory time off at Christmas, another 1 week in the summer. For instance, this year it would have been August when we're dark, and another 7 days that would be at the CEO's discretion. In this case, it could be tied to maybe a few days of, if you put in volunteer work, that would earn a day off, or it could be if we hit our revenue targets or other sort of metrics in-house, that would earn a few other days off as well. And continuing with benefits, we also would like to consider a transportation stipend, which does support our mission statement of decarbonizing the grid. We considered $300 per month. That would cover what it would cost to take Caltrains from the farthest zone, which would be Gilroy, and we do have an employee in Gilroy. Also cover the employees that live in the San Francisco area as well. So we picked that as a placeholder for now. And then other benefits to consider would be a flexible spending account, which was on consent tonight, possible health club memberships that Director Miller mentioned, a good idea that they're using in Saratoga. Workplace charging station that we had on consent tonight, possible rebates for electric vehicle purchases, as well as formalizing a telecommuting policy to allow employees to occasionally work from home. And then wrapping this up with careers. We'd like to offer tuition assistance. Currently, we don't have any policy in place for that. apply towards an employee obtaining an advanced degree, and we would look to tie that to capping that benefit, as well as tying it to grades performance. Also, skills enhancements for employees that have those degrees but want to pursue a certification that is in line with our goals and objectives. We would like to offer that. We'd like to also add a recognition budget. We do it informally now to recognize employees. We'd like to make this part of the budget process, a line item capped at $10,000 per year for events such as picnics or T-shirts or recognition for a great job done. And then lastly would be a part-time or job sharing type policy. In this case would be, there's a large untapped market out there where folks just can't work full-time, but perhaps if we have that need in-house, we can tap into that market by bringing folks in, having 2 employees fill a 40-hour job, each doing 20 hours a week, and usually get 1.5 times the output from that. So we'd like to have a policy in place to tap that resource. This was brought up at the Finance and Administration Committee, a self-directed plan. What that is SVCE would provide a flat dollar amount toward a wide range of benefits. The employee then would choose which to fund. This is becoming more popular in the private sector. Certain benefits tonight would probably qualify for this approach, and others that we haven't considered yet that we would then make part of a smorgasbord type approach, and the employee then picks what that is. I also think that's a longer-term strategy that we don't want to probably consider tonight, but it's something that over the course of the next 6 months to 12 months, we'd like to take a real good stab at this and bring back that option later to the board. So next steps would be, as Grizz mentioned, we talked about the compensation survey. So we'll have something for the Finance Administration Committee to consider next week, and then bring that back to the board in July or September. There's some benefits tonight that are high impact, relatively low cost or no cost, that we would like to receive direction on tonight and then bring back to the board next month. And there's other benefits that we're presenting tonight that we'd like to get the direction from the board and then bring it back at a later date upon further study. So our action item for tonight, of all the benefits that we presented to you, would be allow us to establish a transportation stipend policy and bring that to the board in July. Offer the in lieu of or in lieu of option, which is instead of signing up for our benefits, you opt out and receive a $500 a month payment. The additional leave that we talked about that supports the work-life balance. So in this case, it would be a week off at Christmas, once in the summer, and 7 days at the CEO's discretion. And then telecommuting, which allow employees to occasionally work from home. Again, that would be no cost to SVCE. So with that, that concludes our presentation.
Don, thank you. Anything else you want to add? Okay, so I'd like to bring the conversation up here for any questions of staff. Then I'm going to take public comment, then we'll bring it back up here for further discussion. Are there questions? Rod?
Yeah, so the Bryce Consulting Survey, did we survey on these benefits that you're asking for tonight and otherwise? Can we put a total price tag on all the benefits that peer agencies are offering versus what we're proposing? I feel like, something which would substantially increase leave without kind of seeing how our peers are doing may feel a little premature.
So we haven't priced out all the benefits. At the Finance Admin Committee, we had a little more detail. In the report, we have the transportation stipend priced out. We don't have in the report a comparison to the other CCAs and agencies. So we have some of the data that we collected.
Did Bryce collect that data for us, or do we have it otherwise?
Bryce collected considered the benefits as a total, didn't really dissect it out by each benefit, but looked at the whole benefits package and provided a total cash value to the employee.
So what I'm particularly interested in is if, you know, we're offering this benefit, that benefit, and particularly if we get to smorgasbord, you get to pick, right? If we can put a price tag on that and we know what comparable agencies are doing, then we know that our compensation package as a whole is competitive. So that's my main interest. I'd like to retain, you know, great employees and make sure we're compensating them fairly, right, as a public agency. So that's my question.
Allow us to get back to you on that one. We just got the report this morning.
Got it.
And we'd like to have just a little
Okay.
more time, and we'll answer that
And if-
question, certainly.
I mean, and if we
Finance-
don't have the data, my request would be to go get the data
Okay, sounds good.
on all these things that, you know, assign value to and then see how we're doing versus peers. That would be very helpful. Thank
Lisa.
you.
Thanks. I'm wondering where most of our employees are coming from, or where are we recruiting from? I'm trying to understand what the competition is.
Yeah, so maybe we'll tag team on this. We advertise on certain websites. So things like Energy Central, there's Indeed. We reach out to American Public Power Association. I have to tell you that the other thing is networking too. For example, before I came here, I reached out to some of my colleagues in the Bay Area and said, here are the kinds of positions that I'm looking to fill, and just asked for that kind of information. So it's, you know, some traditional methods and some are just through networking. So far we have found people in California, and, you know, in our latest recruitment that we are undertaking right now for a senior regulatory analyst, we are interviewing someone as far away as Missouri. And so we're doing a Skype interview for that person. And so what's changed from, and this is the experience, so when I joined, I was employee number 14, and I joined in February of this year. Just in these last several months, we've had new CCAs come in. So I think municipal utilities are one place to look at. Investor-owned utilities, consulting firms. It's kind of the same group that I looked at when I was in the muni world too. I do think we have more diversity here. We get people from different backgrounds. I think we're just more open to hiring people from different backgrounds and maybe training them up. So I see the mix of people we have here being maybe a little different in terms of background.
Is your question specific to where they physically are living?
No, it's more kind of if somebody is making a decision on what's the next step in their career, are any of them in the tech sector and they're staying there? Or are they coming here? Or are we mostly finding people from within this industry already? Because I think, as we shared, I had the opportunity to speak with our CEO before this meeting. I work in the tech sector, and this is incredibly competitive, it seems like to me, what's being offered. But that might not be the market we're going after, the tech sector. So if I look at the public sector, this seems more reasonable to me. But as somebody who works in technology at a bunch of startups, you know, where do I sign up?
Yeah. So it's a combination. I think as we mature more, and we start to look at, you know, the new things like decarbonization programs and mobility in the built environment. I mean, these are things that are cutting edge for utilities. And in the municipal space, I know they're barely starting on that. I mean, some of the more progressive utilities have been looking at this for maybe 3 or 4 years only. So I think we may get some folks from the private sector. Internally here, our manager of regulatory and legislative affairs we did recruit her from the private sector. Pam is recruited from the private sector. Though I think Hillary was in the energy space as a consultant. So the other thing that the way both politicians and regulators are looking at us also is, do you have utility experience? And so there needs to be a balance of utility experience and then I'd say additional kind of new thinking. So among the CCA CEOs, more recent hires, we've had like 3, including myself, who have utility experience, and there's several who don't have utility experience. So.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I definitely like to weigh in and just say, you know, I think I even said it at a meeting, either the last one or the one prior. There's no doubt in my mind that hiring is one of our biggest hurdles to operations. It is just incredibly tough right now to find good people and, of course, to keep them. I completely concur with your assessment that it's cheaper to keep them than it is to keep replacing them. However, I do want to be careful about creating an arms race. You know, we are sort of hiring from each other in the CCA community right now. Having said that, perhaps that's what we need to do to keep. You know, we're also saying goodbye today to employees that are going to other CCAs. I get that it's closer to home, but we have to be competitive, and we're in a very expensive place. You know, it's also not fair to necessarily use our peer group of CCAs because some of them aren't similar to Silicon Valley in terms of their cost of living and in terms of housing, et cetera. So I actually applaud going after creative ways of making SVCE the most attractive option. I want to be prudent in how we do that. I want to be careful not to exceed. We are still a publicly run company, so I want to be prudent with that. At the same time, I want to be competitive. I do recognize how important that is. So I guess to be specific and look at actual items, would you like to say something?
Have you blown through the questions and the public comment and we're already into discussion and I just missed it?
No, sorry. Thank you very much.
I've been waiting for discussion.
So let's, more questions first? All right, let's go with Nancy. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Howard.
Yeah, it's my observation that in high tech, the menu of benefits has been changing over the years. And I wanted to just say that in my personal experience recently, some companies have been offering freezing eggs for women, various supportive things for people who are lesbian or gay to get children, and various benefits for those families. And I think that this is I like actually the solution to provide a lump sum that the individuals can allocate how they wish. So I favor that approach, even though I don't think it's on the short list. I just wanted to say that I appreciate that. One question I have about that is that was that proposed with the idea of evening out those kinds of questions?
Yes, because, for example, a transportation benefit, a commute benefit, it may be of value to someone who lives far away and could use Caltrain, but the person who lives down the street, it's like, well, they may feel like it's not an even playing field in terms of benefits. So if you give a lump sum, employees can use it for whatever they wish. So some of the benefits we propose are just everyone would get it, but there's a subset of them that are most suitable for this self-directed benefit approach, which the suggestion actually came from the chair of our Finance and Admin Committee, Burton Craig.
There's some very interesting programs coming out these days for there are some very interesting programs that are coming out, and a number of companies that are helping smaller companies run self-directed benefits programs.
Yeah, I think it offers some solutions, and I'm glad to hear that there would be kind of a menu maybe to make it more normalized across the various needs, because, you know, if you include egg storage and transportation, then, you know, women of childbearing years who live far away might have to make some tough choices, but again, that's their choices to make. So I think it's a good approach. And I look forward to hearing more about that.
Okay, since I got us on this, into this trouble, I'm going to now open it for any members of the public who may wish to weigh in on this topic. Is there anyone here who would like to say anything from the public? Hearing none and seeing none, I'm going to bring it back up here for discussion officially. I apologize for jumping the gun. We'll start with Howard.
Yeah, some of this were things that I was interested in hearing about. Saratoga is one of the smaller cities. We have one of the smallest budgets of any of the cities. We have the lowest tax base for what the city gets of any of the cities per capita. And so we have a difficult time with our employees. But yet we retire many 20 and 30-year people in our city. And the question is why? And it's not on pay. We do a survey and we peg ourselves to the middle of 7 cities. But we do a lot of other stuff with extra benefits. So within the last 6 months, we've added the first city in the county to add free electric charging for our employees. Our city manager said there were no employees, but the first day 5 cars showed up. For a city with 60 people, we thought that was a pretty interesting statement. The healthcare situation, if you recall, for us, when we started Silicon Valley Clean Energy, we went exceptionally chintzy. And I'm sorry if that's not the correct technical term. But we are an operating organization, and I do think that we should be looking at how our benefits compare. We got to look at the cost. We've got to see how it fits with everything else. But I think there's the top line number, you know, how we compare salary-wise. There's sort of the traditional benefits. There's the a la carte approaches and all of that. There's egg freezing, which I didn't see on the list, but it was brought up. And then there are things that are synergistic with our own mission, fuel switching, you know, paying for transit, or we just approved today to allow our employees to charge. Those are very consistent with the mission of the organization. And then there's just the downright simple things. Our employees in Saratoga, again, there's only 60 of them, we're worried about not really having access to health facilities. We have a rec center, we really don't have a gym, we don't have showers for employees. You know, I think that's where they were trying to push, but we actually got a sweetheart deal from our local YMCA, about 1/3 of the cost that you or I would pay. And, you know, that's an interesting benefit within a small city or a small organization. Or during the summer, we bring the ice cream truck once a month out to our courtyard. And it's a fancy ice cream truck with dipped ice cream bars and all of that. And I'm led to believe it costs our city manager $500 a shot. But the people just love that this goes on. And it's not costing a lot of money, but it builds a lot of morale and a lot of goodwill. And so while I look at the list and I see the need to improve some of our benefits and make sure that we're cost competitive, I see equal need for the really low dollar things, the T-shirts and the Friday afternoon, you know, pretzels and the ice creams as being super valuable to making sort of a friendly, happy work environment. And so, you know, I don't know how this all comes back, Grish, but, you know, I'm hopeful that we're not trading off ice cream bars for a la carte programs. It seems like we should be able to do something at each of the buckets. And I guess, bottom line, I'm super happy that we're doing something, and I look forward to seeing what the price tag would be.
Who's next? Liz.
Thank you. I'm also with Howard and other members, I'm sure looking at this is the right thing to do. So I'm very pleased to see us doing this. And we have grown and learned over this past year, at least I certainly feel like we have. I liked the starting point of looking at our mission statement and how our employees are so essential and critical to the success of meeting our mission statement. I also think in terms of the real world, the world has changed. It's certainly different than when I was a regular employee. This whole a la carte approach and the range of types of support programs, benefits that need to be out there is drastically different. So I've certainly had to regroup my own thinking on a lot of this. When it comes down to us as an organization, you can all close your ears now. I think Dawn made a presentation 2 weeks ago at the ABAG assembly. And I sat in, and I know Rod came in for portions of it. There were 3 different presentations, of which Dawn was one. And there was no question for me, listening to those presentations, that our organization is on top of it all. Everything people were talking about is, we could do this, and this is ideal, and this, we were surpassing. Okay. We, as a board, have really benefited from the staff bringing us forward to, I think, an extraordinarily high level of ideas and quality of product and services. And you've put up with a lot of challenges from us. You've dealt well with the challenges that we've brought to you. And I think that we have gone through some rough patches, and we lost our CEO, and the quality of the people that we have all stepped up. So to me, that says that we need to be aware that the support that the board offers for the staff has to be commensurate with what we're asking from them. Whatever pops up, and there's been humdingers, and lots of innovation. So I think that it is important to recognize that we don't have, I'm going to call it a regular staff. These are all professionals, unique, that work well together. I certainly feel that we need to be supportive of what each person needs in the way of benefits and the menu of benefits, because the synergy that has gotten us to where we are, I think, is exceptional, and I would like to not have to lose more people. The competition is going to be, or is, fierce. Given what I saw 2 weeks ago, competition is fierce. And we can't be naive about that. But mostly, I think we have to recognize what we're asking of the staff that we have and how they make us and our organization successful. So I'm supportive of reevaluating and being flexible, new way of thinking to see how we can meet the needs for the world in which we are living. And Silicon Valley is crazy.
Thank you. Rod?
Oh, thank you.
Before you start, can I just say, I really do want to hear from everybody, even if it's just to say, I really don't have any thoughts, so just prepare yourself.
So I think what you're talking about is direction to go ahead and not move anything in particular tonight for adoption, but queue it up for adoption either in July or September, right? These shorter term items?
Yes, so these 4 items.
Okay.
If we get the head nods from you.
Yeah.
Would be brought back as a written policy, detail, et cetera. Yeah.
So, I'm fine with that. It's, but I would say I'm going to be keenly interested in how we compare, right? How are we stacking up? And we might find that in lieu of getting the data, we might find we're not doing enough, right? So it's not, it's about being competitive in the competitive market, but looking at overall benefits, I think is the right way to do it. It works in the private sector. If you're at a startup, you comp other startups. You recognize the risk factor in stock, and you put some value on that based on the stage of the company. Here we are in a different position, but whether you're coming from an energy consultant like E3 or another government agency, we're running a business here, and so we have to be willing to pay people as if we were running a business, right? And I appreciate all the prior comments, particularly would add to Howard's. I think for those benefits that help build a very positive culture at the company or are consistent with our mission. So incentives that get people moved around with less carbon, right? I think those are benefits that we put some special privilege to, meaning that in a pool of a la carte benefits, you know, I'd still like to see some of these things have favored treatment. So, yes, I realize that everybody may not be able to take Caltrain. An employee from Cupertino will probably have to walk or ride their bike. Yeah, but right, if the benefit in order to bringing an EV to work because of charging or other incentives, I think creating a program that incents the behavior and the change we'd like to see in the rest of Silicon Valley among our employee base is great. I just think, you know, great culture is made when we encourage people to work hard together and also play hard together. So these things that, yes, as Howard says, don't have to cost a lot of money, but encourage people to hang around on a Friday afternoon and get to know each other, really help weave the fabric. So I'm supportive of this. Thank you.
Who would like to go next? Let me go to Jeannie, then you, Lisa. Then over here.
So I want to start by saying thanks. I really do appreciate staff's approach that you're taking. I think it is very balanced. I think it's being very thoughtful. You know, I really buy into this concept of the dissatisfactors and the motivators, and it really is having to deal with both sides of that equation. So I do applaud you in terms of the approach and how you're thinking about this. But I have a couple of cautionary things. Maybe cautionary isn't really the right word I want, but I think there are certain things that we need to make sure that we are looking through with a certain lens. One is, I would like to remind, not so much staff, but my colleagues up here, we are a public agency, okay? And you know what, I would say, not only do we have wonderful employees here who are running a business, I think my city staff would say they are also running a business. It's the business of the city, okay? So I think we got to watch with sometimes how we kind of flower. So I just remember, we are a public agency. I'm assuming as a public agency, we also disclose publicly, like all the other public agencies, in terms of our compensation schedules, et cetera. And again, when we started this thing, you know, we talk about PG&E and the salaries and everything. So again, to me, it's not a caution, because I have all the confidence in the world that they are thoughtful and all. It's just, I would say we need to think about what we're saying up here as well. The second thing is, I think we always have to make sure that we have a long view, okay? And then when I say the long view, it is in terms of financial stability. So as you open up, we heard one about freezing eggs, okay? So you even have board members who are willing to get outside of the box as well. You know, you do have agencies, and you'll find, you know, that offer, you know, at the end of their career and all, you know, they offer lifetime medical. So anything, again, I'm not saying, I'm not recommending any of those, but anything that you end up looking at and considering, we need to look at that long term, okay? For those of, you know, a good decision we made is we're not part of CalPERS, you know? We've got a defined contribution plan. Why do we do that? Because we took a look at the long-term financial stability, okay? So we've already done that. I would encourage us to continue to do that. Then the third one is, I'm going to ask as a board member, my personal preference, okay, is that we don't piecemeal this. I would rather staff take the time and think this whole thing through. So while I can look at the recommendation and say, can I support a transportation stipend? The answer is absolutely yes. However, if you haven't completely baked your thoughts in terms of, okay, what are the standard kinds of things, and then what am I going to put into that a la carte menu where, you know, an employee has X dollars and you can pick all of that. I'd rather us make those decisions, because I think the case in point is the transportation one, okay? So maybe a transit stipend I might not want because I live too close, but gosh, you know, maybe I want to say, how about a stipend toward an electric bike because I live that close and I'd rather do that, or something else, right? Or even a regular pedal bike. But, you know, anything in terms of mode shift, what are some of the other things? So again, don't come piecemeal, because I think it needs to be holistic. And when I say this, I'm going to say to the employees, because always our biggest audience is our employees versus the public being here. I hope that you walk away tonight with confidence that you've got a board who's very, very supportive of the value that our employees have. And I hope you also feel like, even if we take a little bit more time to not be piecemeal, but to be holistic, that you would find benefit in that. And then I would also, I'm sure you're already doing it, but if you're not, if you have ideas, if you have things, you know, based on this conversation, go talk to your CEO, you know. Like that idea of freezing eggs, go talk about freezing eggs. You got your own thing, you know. But again, help contribute to a holistic thought process in terms of what we're doing here. In terms of the recommendations also, yeah, I already said, you know, again, we do it holistically. I like a lot of the thinking. I like the in lieu, you know, that one I might be willing to take piecemeal, because I think that one's just one of the standard kinds of things. It's not something you're going to put on a menu. Additional leave, again, look at that holistically. I'm supportive of that approach. The telecommuting, I would offer to you, because I sit on a few other boards. I have not seen it, but a number of agencies that I'm affiliated with are citing the city and county of San Francisco as having put together a very thoughtful, and a couple of other people are looking at emulating what they're doing. So you might want to look at that when you look at your telecommuting thing, just because I'm a big fan of beg, borrow, and steal. And let's see. And I have a couple more. One other one. I like the idea in terms of the leave and looking at events. That, because again, part of dissatisfied factors is kind of if I don't have a relationship, it's not about liking or not, with my fellow employees, you know, it doesn't feel good coming to work every day. So I like some of the things, you know, whether you're doing a picnic or whatever, I would ask that you consider family type oriented things as well. And actually, I want one of my favorite ones to be considered, and that is maybe one of these things is an event or something where it's a pancake breakfast, but it's the board members who are serving the employees, who are, you know, maybe management is helping to cook and boards helping to serve, or vice versa. But I do believe building part of that culture is an important part. And I think the board, we have that opportunity to play that role in terms of setting some of the tone for the culture. So I think that covers my comments. And again, I really appreciate the thought you're putting into this. So thank you very much.
Lisa.
So I heard you talk about, this should be a great place to work, and I totally agree with that because of the implications, which are people will stay someplace if it's a great place to work. And the disruption and cost to an organization when you're constantly recruiting and bringing new employees up to speed is really challenging. So it'd be much better to keep the employees that we have. I think it's good to have diversity, which is why I was asking the question about the competition. I think it's good to have diversity in the employees, the backgrounds. I think you get a lot better outcome when you have people with different backgrounds bringing different experience and knowledge to bear, no matter what topic you're addressing. So if we're competing then with public agencies as well as the private sector, things are pretty different in the private sector. And there are some things that are not available to public agencies that you do find in the private sector, but there are some things that cross both of them. And certainly in the private sector, while you're things like a defined contribution benefit or retirement plan, all the companies I've worked for have had 401ks, but I can only think of one in the past 30 years that ever had a matching, because mostly I'm working with smaller companies that they just can't afford that. On the other hand, you get options and you hope it goes public and you make millions. That's not available to the public sector. So I feel like there's always trade-offs here, but you want to make this place very attractive. And I think some of the things folks have talked about, there's the soft things that add to the culture, celebrating things together, having fun together, getting to know each other are really, really important, as well as the more tangible things like benefits. I'm a big fan of the, let's see, you called it the self-directed plan. I think because you have a diversity of employees who have different needs and different things that are important to them, it is important to provide that cafeteria of menu of choices. And I actually would put the in lieu on that because, and we talked about this earlier, if, as a single person, I don't have any other access to insurance unless I pay for it myself, then I wouldn't take advantage of the $500, that you get for not taking advantage of that. So, but something might be really important to me, the transportation subsidy. So, I think somebody said earlier it'd be important to kind of align this organization and the goals of this organization and the values with some of the elements of the overall compensation and what you get here. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So encouraging folks to have electric vehicles and offering the ability to recharge them, things like that would make a lot of sense that everybody would have access to those and it wouldn't be part of the cafeteria. So let's see, the 4 questions, what were those?
They are specific.
Did I already touch on those?
In lieu, additional leave, and telecommuting.
Yeah, so I didn't touch on telecommuting. I think that's a tough one. I've seen companies that have great success with it and others where it's kind of a challenge. I think a lot depends on the relationship between the manager and the employee. I think it's sort of a case-by-case basis. This is a small enough organization that I think you can certainly try it. If it works, great, make it into a formal program, but maybe it's something that you have to kind of work with at the beginning. And I think I touched on all the others. Thanks.
Terrific. Marika, would you go next, please?
Thank you. So I'm going to be in agreement with the majority of what the directors have said. One of the things that I do, I'm a big fan of the self-directed. I think, as just Lisa had mentioned, I think everyone's position in life is unique, and so the ability to choose which benefit is most applicable to your life at that particular time, I think that's a unique benefit that not many organizations offer. The only thing I would also add, and perhaps it's already there, is just the flexibility and encouragement for employees to volunteer. Whether it's in the communities they're working in or the communities that they reside in. I think as city officials, we all desire more participation from our residents, and so an organization that we support that also instills that in its employees, I think, is something I would really like to promote. So, thank you.
Thank you, and I will assure you it's part of the time off conversation. Who else? I don't want to put people on the spot. I'm not going to call on you like first grade, but I definitely would love to hear from you if you have anything to say. Yes, Steve.
I'll just say that when you did your pre-discussion that I agreed with everything you said then. and what has come up in the discussion since, started by Howard, was it doesn't have to be something you spend money on. It has to be a feeling of community within the organization. And if you read in the Business Journal all these best places to work things, you see that they feel like it's almost an extension of their family kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So concentrating on those things, I think, is very important too.
Great.
And I'll just add, I'd like to reinforce a couple of the points that Lisa made. I thought they were really well done. And Jeannie's thought that we really ought to be listening to our employees. about what they would value, right?
Mhm.
Both on the stuff that's not so expensive and the stuff that is. I think it could make a lot of sense in an organization this size for a CEO or somebody working, or maybe it's Don, to really have a good conversation with employees saying, here's what the organization could do, right? If we have X amount of dollars, here's roughly what these things cost. What things would you put the most value on? I think that would be a good idea. Thank you.
Nancy?
Yeah, thank you. So I looked at these four areas for recommendation for direction tonight, and I wanted to just state that I appreciate the breakdown of the, what are we calling this? Compensation and benefits in terms of pay, benefits, and career. And none of these that we're moving forward tonight fall under the category of career. So I think that's something to beef up in upcoming times. But many of these fall under benefits, and the in lieu of falls under pay. The in lieu of is a no-brainer. I 100% support that one. The transportation stipend and the telecommuting both fall under the hubris, I guess, or the aegis of transportation demand management. And I think that sets us up for, future statements about that. I think it would be great if, when we build our first building and all that sort of thing, that we consider the bold step of maybe looking at unbundled parking, because that sends a really strong message about committing to using public transit. But for now, I'm happy to support the transportation stipend. And to the point of the small things, popcorn and, okay, well, with us it's popcorn, but cupcakes or whatever. I think the additional leave flexibility that's at the discretion of the CEO is a fabulous benefit, because who doesn't want more time off? I think that's a really good one. And how many days is it? It's a mandatory 2 weeks
15.
At the end of the year makes complete sense to me. Nobody does anything anyway. And 7 days of CEO discretion. So I support all of these, and I do look forward to more details about some of the other ones. And I will leave you with the final point for the future ones, is that I would like to see, let me just say, I know this is almost heresy at a electrification place, but some of us do have hydrogen cars. So when you look at, it's electric, but I sure hope so. But one of the benefits that I have seen at companies is to have green car parking. So I can't really, in good conscience, park for an EV charging station, but some companies around here have green vehicle parking, which I really appreciate. So that's just something to consider. All right, and I know there was another brilliant thought that I had, but I don't remember it. And
We're confident you did too. Is there anyone else? Because I would like to just wrap up with a few comments of my own, if there's nothing else anybody would like to say. Okay, so it sounds like you've gotten a fair amount of feedback. I definitely think there's an enormous amount of momentum behind the a la carte type structure. I would want to just make sure, and I'm sure you've done this, but just want to make sure that these benefits that can be pulled out and bestowed to an employee when they can be done without becoming taxable income ought to be considered. In other words, the transportation stipend, if it can be we purchase the Clipper cards or the VTA cards and hand them out, and it's not bestowed as part of additional earnings and then becoming taxable. I hope those mechanics have been considered as part of this larger discussion. I also would sort of lean towards firmly agreeing that the agency consider being closed the week of Christmas to New Year's. I think that's kind of universally agreed upon by most. You know, schools are out, my city is closed. I certainly don't need to hear from all 12 other members here, but it's awfully quiet in the Bay Area around the holidays. So I think that's a sort of a no-brainer. I think the hard set dates in the summer would be a little more difficult because sometimes the 4th of July is already a 3 or 4 day weekend and not necessarily easy to tag a whole week off around and make it a firm date. So the only thing I'd ask is that if we were going to go that route, that we have some sort of formal announcement of when it is well in advance of what we plan to do so that staff can take full advantage, that they're not just noticed 90 days before, hey, by the way, you're going to get the week off at Christmas this year, making it expensive and difficult to make last-minute plans. So I'd like to see us be very thoughtful about, if we're going to do it, be communicating that in advance so that it can be fully utilized and be a real benefit to all employees. And then I really want to capitalize on something Lisa said. I think the telecommuting is a great concept, but I think there is also a great deal of discretion required. And I'm going to leave that in your lap because sometimes jobs aren't done well when they're not done in person. There's a fair amount of collaboration, there's a fair amount of work that goes on in the office that is purely driven by the people who are in the room at the time. So I am not a real, I hate to be publicly saying how much I don't really love that concept, but I want to leave it in your hands rather than have a hard, fast policy about saying we ought to do every other Friday you get off kind of thing. That's a difficult equation when you're small as we are. So I think that is an idea that I would want to see a little more hard information around before I would just say, heck yeah, that's awesome. Finally, these are items that you're not asking for comment on tonight, but I want to absolutely jump on them. Pay for performance, cost of living adjustments, and additional SVCE funded education and job training are high on my list of benefits that people take very seriously and put a great deal of value in. So I like the a la carte plan. I think you've gotten a fair amount of feedback. I tried to get it from everybody up here tonight. I'm going to leave it up to you guys to take this information and craft something you think is workable and makes us competitive and one of the best places to work in the Bay Area. Thank you. Anything else before I move on? Okay, with that, we're moving on to item number 6, the CEO's report.
Thank you, Chair Corrigan. So I want to highlight a few things. First, we have, I referenced it earlier, we have the award, the Hermes Award. I want to just highlight that. And Victoria, maybe you could hand the award to Director Craig and it can be passed around. And that's for the video that was produced that explained how to read the bill. Two important items I want to highlight from the CEO report is, so Director Craig, yeah, just pass it down. Yes, we have, yeah.
Could I interrupt you for one moment now that I
Yes.
have this in my hand? We have one of these, right?
Yes.
Do we have the ability to order a duplicate? I guess
Yes.
what I would like to recommend, do we? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay, because I would like, if we haven't, we should order the duplicate. So
Oh, so she
the
can-
individual
Yes,
gets to
that's-
be recognized. We get one on our shelf, but no, their hard work needs to be recognized that way as well. And so
Wonderful
we can order a
idea.
duplicate, maybe
Yep.
she can leave with the original and
Yes.
we'll get the duplicate.
great idea.
Sorry, I didn't
No.
want to interrupt, but it was really important to me.
Thank you, thank you. So a couple of items from the report I wanted to highlight for you. First is Marin MCE has received a credit rating from Moody's. This is a big deal. They are the first CCA to receive a credit rating, and even though there may be, some folks may have wanted the credit rating to be a little higher, I think the fact they have a credit rating has kind of broken the dam. It says that CCAs have arrived. The rating agencies have assessed the risk of our future at this time and has said, we're going to give you a investment grade credit rating. So it's great news. Publicly congratulate MCE. We have been in touch with them. They are thrilled to have received this credit rating. We have also been in touch with financial advisors. We're going to be meeting with Moody's in a couple of weeks. And I'm going to be hiring a financial advisor to help us navigate the next 2 years on how we can achieve our credit rating to be at least what Marin has achieved or better than that. So we'll be working on that over the next
We
couple of
really
weeks.
hope you're going to get us an A in there to lead it.
So,
It's only a couple of steps.
Yeah, it's there are lots of cool things that we could do, and the things in terms of financial policies, our hedging strategy. There's the number of categories that we have to go through. So we'll be bringing that to you in the months to come on how we are getting there. Last, I wanted to update you on an idea we're talking about at Cal CCA, and this is the concept of a JPA of several CCAs. Over the last year, we found that we've run into some challenges when we are out buying RA capacity, and even with this deal we have with Monterey Bay, we realized that if we were larger, we'd get a better price, and our credit requirements would also be better. So we're looking at putting together this JPA, and I'll be bringing back to you in July a presentation which goes through some of the main points of what this JPA is going to do. It's essentially going to be looking at RA capacity, renewable procurement, some decarbonization products, like if we want to buy in bulk for rebate purposes, hot water heat pumps. It's just easier when you have many JPAs together to get to some of these large warehouses, etc. So that'll be brought to you at least in presentation form in July, and the idea, at least at the CCA level across California, is to get it signed in September. So before we get into the next year of having to buy RA, we have this. From a political standpoint, it'll also be looked upon very positively. If you remember, the Green Book talked about fragmentation and splintering in this industry and ascribed some of this to CCAs. Having several CCAs across California join together for bulk purchases for a common interest would send a message that's more than just a financial benefit. So I'll be bringing that to you next month. And also, I'll be bringing it to the executive committee at the end of this month.
Question?
Yes.
So this is something new for me, and if I may ask, I don't understand how you can have a JPA board comprised of JPAs, so you're going to have to help me with that.
We have the person.
So under state law, it does permit a JPA to be made up of JPAs. So it's a kind of interesting twist. Not typical, but it's been done. And so one of the questions will be, what is going to be the governing board for the new JPA? And what authority will those members have in incurring obligations on behalf of the JPA, and how will those obligations be themselves financed and paid for? So, there's some interesting issues to walk through, and we're doing that together right now at the staff level, and that'll be part of the report back to you once we've had a chance to go through the agreement and point out the main issues and any questions that we ourselves may have as to how to put this together.
And remember, one part of employee satisfaction and such is feeling like you're working on challenging assignments. Sounds like Greg's going to have some job satisfaction.
Hi,
It is,
Rod.
actually.
So I think my understanding is you're familiar with this from municipal utilities, where you go in together on a JPA to get more leverage with.
Yes. Yep.
So this is a familiar model.
Yeah.
It could be done by, can you talk to us about how many cities may typically band together to purchase power in Northern or Southern California?
Well, in Northern California, we have NCPA, which is comprised of 16 cities. And within those 16 cities, they have a power pool, which is comprised of 10 cities. But they also have other agreements under the JPA where, for example, they built the Lodi Energy Center, a 250 megawatt combined cycle plant, where they had few NCPA members and also folks who are not members of NCPA, like Modesto Irrigation District and California Department of Water Resources. So they developed a hybrid kind of agreement.
Okay.
With each of these, I like to say it's a better mousetrap. It's not perfect, because the key thing comes in risk allocation.
Yeah.
When you're banding together, what happens
If one of them,
when something goes wrong?
yeah, one of the agencies
Yes. Who's going to pick up the
suffers
pieces at that time?
a
And this
calamity.
is something in all the time I've worked with NCPA, that issue came up during the energy crisis,
Yeah,
when we had very high volatility in the power markets. Down in Southern California, we have Southern California Public Power Agency, or SCAPA, and that's 12 cities and an irrigation district.
some of them are really big cities, right?
Yeah, it's LADWP, and Imperial Irrigation District is giant. So we're talking about more than 4 million customers are served by that. Yeah, SCAPA is I'd say about 6-7 times the size of Northern California Power Agency.
Right.
So these things have been tested out. SCAPA has entered into their 25th year. NCPA, I believe, will be celebrating its 50th year this year. So this is a model that has been around for a while.
And you're familiar with this because you personally have been a leader in, was it Southern California?
Yeah, I was the president of SCAPA for a year.
Okay, so you're familiar with all of this, and my understanding is also that this JPA doesn't mean that by any means you're procuring all your power,
That's correct.
or basically once you form the structure, you can, certain parties that want to on any given deal can come in or not, right? So if there's a project to go build a clean coal plant, we probably wouldn't be so very interested in that.
That's correct. It is an a la carte approach. That's the thinking.
Yeah.
Where only the
Okay.
coalitions of the willing.
Sorry, I saw somebody laughing. Thank you very much, Don.
Yeah. So it'll be those who are interested in projects that would sign up, and we will limit the risk to within that project group.
I see. Right, so that also helps contain risk.
That's correct.
But for things we all have an interest in, like procuring RA, rather than letting a few market makers, like 3 big IOUs in the state, manipulate us individually, we'd go in there and have more power to secure a reasonable deal.
Yeah, we're all going after the same product. There's
Yeah.
a limited amount there, and so you have better visibility.
Right.
It's a better use of our staff, because that's reliability. We know it's compliance related.
Mhm.
Whereas when you look at what comprises our portfolio, we have a 100% carbon-free portfolio. Whereas, say, for example, PCE may want to buy a little more renewable power. So each of us can figure out what we need from our respective governing boards and then get it purchased through that. But I would say, at least my thinking is, we'd still want to have our core of resource planning and portfolio management, so we know what our portfolio should look like, and actually getting some of these contracts executed and negotiated in bulk, we can go through this JPA.
Finally, on a different subject, I was anxiously awaiting your report about the Bay Area Air Quality Management District grants that were approved last week. Do you want to talk to them?
Yes. Thank you very much for your approval of the grant. last
You're
the
welcome.
last month. And you, of course, were on the board. So we applied for $500,000 of matching funds, and we were awarded $325,000. It was oversubscribed, and so the district had to make some tough choices in allocating the money. We're very pleased with the $325,000. The story's not over because we will come back to the board to actually accept the grant, and then we're looking into some of the details associated with implementation. So we'll be back to you with more information there.
So I'll just comment that for these, I mean, this was heat pump water heaters.
Mm-hmm.
There were actually 3 grants made in this category. One to Bayren, that's covering many counties at 400, and to San Jose for the 325, and to us for 325. So the idea of these Air District grants is to incent new things. I think Peter was talking about getting over the potential energy hump earlier. You must have a background in physics, sir, as do I. And so, right, this is still new technology.
Mm-hmm.
The economics are being proven, and how people get this done is still a model under consideration. But we recognize that, and when we made these grants, and you know, we're looking forward to seeing how successful we can be with this program, and frankly, yeah, what it nets us in terms of carbon savings and bucks per MT equivalent. So.
Anything else? Yeah,
Yes.
Girish.
I would like to thank Director Smith and Sinks for spending a very, very long day with us in Sacramento on May 16th for our first lobby day. It was a very successful trip. We went to 10 different offices, met with 6 different legislators, and we will continue to have that kind of engagement up in Sacramento. We've done some follow-up. And with that, I'm going to ask Hillary to come up to provide her legislative and regulatory report, and she'll also be available to answer any questions.
Good evening, directors. Hillary Staver, Regulatory and Legislative Affairs. So I'll start with legislative to dovetail with what Girish was saying. So that was an excellent day. Thank you both for being there. And now we're focusing on making sure that we follow up and kind of build on the momentum that we gathered by being there in person for a day. So one of the things that we're focusing on most strongly is trying to solidify our relationship with the Bay Area Caucus. That's a group of legislators, as the name would suggest, that represents the Bay Area, which, as you all know, is now almost entirely covered by CCAs. So that's an opportunity that we see for working not only with these legislators, but also with other CCAs to kind of strengthen the regional relationship there. So we're following up on that. Also elsewhere in the legislature, a note on one thing that we're watching. Really one of the biggest issues that's happening this session is really not directly related to CCAs, but fire liability. That's one that we're keeping an eye on. We don't have any immediate action items on it right now, but we're following it strongly as our CalCCA's lobbyists, because that could have a lot of implications all over the industry. So thank you very much for a really successful day on May 16th. That was fantastic, and we're planning to make that very much an annual tradition, if not multi-annual. So then moving over to the regulatory side, really busy month. I'll start with the known stuff. The PCIA, the Power Charge and Difference Adjustment proceeding, continues to move along on schedule. So this Friday, we are submitting reply briefs, briefing is the last stage of the regulatory process. And so this is the last written document that's going to be submitted to the record before we get a proposed decision. So we are still on track to get a proposed decision in that proceeding around the end of summer 2018, which hopefully then will be soon enough to go into effect on the 1st of January 2019. Then we have the integrated resource planning proceeding. You have probably seen in the packet, there was a special memo this month. So we are currently working, there are several of us involved at the staff level on putting this together. And I wanted to make sure that it's clear there's a differentiation between this document that you'll be seeing next month that is going to the Public Utilities Commission to fulfill our official compliance requirement for the state, and the one that we are planning to produce later this year, which will be bear a stronger resemblance to the documents you may have seen from other CCAs that were put together over the past few years on a voluntary basis. Those are more sort of institutional overview documents created for the public that sort of highlight the goals and mission of the organization and kind of all of the different ways we're getting to those goals. Whereas this document that we're putting together for the Public Utilities Commission, the real core goal of this is to provide CPUC staff with modeling inputs that they can use for this statewide modeling operation that is looking at the outcomes for the sector in 2030. So we're trying to, so the document you'll be seeing is geared, the specifications of it are geared very specifically toward the needs of the CPUC staff, which is different from a public-facing document. So keep an eye out for that. Those are going to be due to the Commission on August 1st, followed by a public workshop on August 7th, and then continued evidentiary processing through the fall. And then finally, I wanted to bring up a new proceeding that has really picked up in importance for us recently, which is resource adequacy. There's a proceeding, this started actually back last September, and it's divided into tracks, which are sort of broad phases of the proceeding that kind of tackle questions of ranked levels of time urgency. So we're just now wrapping up track 1, and in that track, the CCA voice was represented by a group of joint CCA parties, including SVCE. But especially with the release of the Green Book, it's become apparent that that proceeding is going to be the discussion space for a lot of the issues raised in the Green Book around sort of the changing nature of the industry and the decentralization of energy supply. So CalCCA has now put together and ramped up a full working group similar to what we've got for the PCIA. We're bringing in external counsel, technical experts, that kind of thing. So that has become, that has basically become one of the top proceedings that CalCCA is going to be working on in basically the next few years, and SVCE is taking a very active role in that. So we're looking forward to using that as a way to discuss in more concrete terms a lot of the issues from the Green Book, since the Green Book is kind of a standalone document outside of an official commission proceeding. So that's the highlights for this month, and I'll open it up to questions.
Any questions? Liz?
Thank you. Just as an FYI, and Don can add to this, we, at the presentation at ABAG, the supervisor from Contra Costa County was there and was very engaged in CCAs, just completely engaged. And it made me feel that we may want to connect with all the supervisors in all of the Bay Area counties to have them be a block of support for CCAs that they can leverage their assembly, their legislative groups as well. And we really can, and they're already connected to them. So that has a potential strength in numbers there. But it was I thought it was very well engaged. And the other thing that's of note, I think I read where the PUC is moving to Sacramento. It's moving out of San Francisco to Sacramento. So I read that in a real estate article. So I may be wrong, but I did read it, so keep an eye on that.
Okay. Okay.
All right. For further research.
Okay, any other questions? Jeannie?
Yeah, to say it's going to feel like there's no segue on this one. I received an email from the Vice Mayor of Culver City, and I was wondering whether or not, if any of the CCAs have received this, or any of you guys as electeds. There's a group of elected officials that are all putting their name to a letter to Governor Brown asking to halt permitting of new oil and gas projects. Second is to create a 2,500-foot public health drilling setback from homes and vulnerable areas. And the third bullet is 100% clean energy, starting with investments in disadvantaged communities. And so, did you hear anything about this? Do you know whether or not any of the other CCAs and whether they're board members or looking at taking positions on, or lending their names to this, and does it make sense for us as board members to lend our names to this thing?
I'm not familiar with that letter, but if you're willing to share it, I would be happy to look into it and ask around and see if others have.
I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll forward it, and then if, I don't, you said you did get it, Liz? And you got it, so maybe what we can do is go ahead, you got it too. So make sure that all the board members have seen that as well.
Well, I mean, actually, this is more aligned with the Air District. So before we think about doing anything with this as a group,
I was looking at it maybe in terms of individually, and I just want to make sure if we're doing something that deals with clean energy and all that. We don't do anything that's
I think there are
at cross
probably a
purposes
lot
with
of
it.
issues with getting as specific as this, but I would suggest we consult with the Air District before we, if we were to try to weigh in as a body here, I'd be pretty clear that I'd want to do that.
Is this something the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee could take a look at?
In theory.
I think we could take a look at the letter and get back to you.
Decide what to do.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, anything else? Anything else, Hillary? Thank you again for all your excellent work. Garish, anything else you'd like to add to the CEO's report? I'm going to...
Pam, anything? All good? Okay. I think we're good.
Okay, terrific. Moving on to the agenda item number 7, the Executive Committee report, which I am going to deliver, is no report. We've not... Excuse me. Sure, James, I'll be happy to entertain public comment here.
Thank you. Just on the last item. That letter I've seen in a lot of environmental advocacy, climate action group discussions, so that's where I've seen that go around. So it's definitely a real thing among very solid environmental groups, just so you know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The Executive Committee has not met since March. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is June 26th at 11:30 a.m. in the SVCEA office. I plan to be there. The next item on the agenda is the Finance and Administration Committee report, which I believe Director Craig will give.
Yes, I will. The Finance and Administration Committee met on May the 30th, and we voted to recommend the amended reserve policy, which was item 1F on the agenda this evening. We reviewed various facility options and recommended to expand the existing office space, which was item 1G on the agenda. And we recommended to establish a line of credit and discuss the provided suggestions for potential SVCE benefits and compensation. We had a very spirited discussion. I think it even rivaled our discussion here tonight in terms of time. And let me just let everybody know, we went backward. We went through a wall. Terms like Google Light were thrown out. It was a very, very good discussion, and I think we brought a lot of that here tonight. And let's see, what else do we do? We're going to have another meeting, as we said, a special meeting on June 19th, so see y'all there.
You guys are doing some incredible work. That's great. Thank you. The next committee report is out of Legislative and Ad Hoc Committee, and Director Smith, do you have anything to report?
Sure, thank you. Very briefly, we mentioned earlier, the staff mentioned earlier that we met with, we had 10 meetings, 6 with legislators. We were very well briefed by staff, and I would like to, I'll not give a rundown of all the people we met with, but we learned a lot, and we learned about how to do it better next time. And I have to say that one of the highlights of the day was the index card that we got. And so we were able to we had a listing, a schedule on one side and our talking points on the other side. It was very discreet, and we always knew where we were supposed to go and what we were supposed to say, which was very helpful. And it was very useful to educate the legislators on they call them members, the members on CCAs and what's at stake and what we feel our value is. So a very good day all around. And I also got to get better acquainted with my board colleague, Rod Sinks, and I would just defer to him if he has anything he wants to add. And before I do, I want to say I'm very pleased to hear that it's going to be a thing. Because it was a lot of, it felt very good to go out and evangelize and promote what we are doing here and the importance of it. So thanks to staff for all their work and getting us prepared. And I'm really glad that the board saw fit to form the ad hoc legislative committee.
Rod, you've been invited to tag on to that.
You bet. So we actually went with people from Monterey Bay, Community Power. So right, what we were about half of the group, and Monterey Bay was about half the group. So it was good getting to know them. From the moment we arrived in Sacramento, I think our lobbyist was grateful that we had come. The Green Book really is quite an attack on a lot of things, but mostly the idea that, you know, we're somehow creating the conditions of risk that existed when you had all these for-profit entities like Enron coming in and running their schemes in the state of California. So, of course, we have a very different perspective. We have operating bodies, boards such as this, and we're accountable to voters. And I was really impressed with the collateral of the card and the other collateral that Hillary put together. I'd hope that we could get that to all the board members here, because it was really a great, between the letter and the other collateral we had, I thought it was really well done. And for the first time, to me, right, in going in to talk to legislators, it was no longer just a friendly conversation about the great things we're doing, although we did that too, we explained that, but we also had a very clear a message to the legislators about our view of the Green Book. And so that was, I think the collateral would be worth sharing with the rest of the board. And Hillary, I don't know if you have comments, but I was blown away. I thought you did a great job preparing for this.
If I could make one quick follow-up comment to that, I would like to give a shout out to our outreach team, Paige and Julia and Pam, because the collateral was very much a team effort.
Yeah, it was a team
I think
effort.
they did a fantastic job.
Yes, yes.
High fives back to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good job, guys.
But we
Thank
got
you.
to tell our message in a fact sheet, you know, about what we've done, but it was also then, you know, pretty clear that the CPUC is waging war on us, and we have an opinion on this, and we're looking for champions like Jerry Hill and Mark Stone and others to say, to prepare for legislation that could reinforce what the CPUC is doing. And we're going to have to think about when we go on the offense. So thank you.
Terrific. Okay, so this is the time in the agenda when we talk about any other agenda items you'd like to see for future agendas or other board member announcements. Does anybody here have anything they'd like to announce or have added to a future agenda? Seeing none, I would like to thank Lisa and Maurico for being here tonight and for your thoughtful input from everyone. I would like to adjourn tonight's meeting, again celebrating Milpitas joining us. We're so thrilled to have the more the merrier, quite literally. The next meeting is July 11th. I already know I am not going to be here. Margaret will be running the meeting in my absence. My alternate will be attending. I understand at least one or two other members also will be gone. So please check your calendar. Make sure your alternate is available if you are not available. And communicate early and often about who will be sitting up here so that Margaret can be prepared. Thank you, and I'll adjourn tonight's meeting.